Welcome to this retrospective slash review for the game Divinity 2, and specifically the developer's cut, which I purchased off of GOG.com, but I think you can also get the same version off of Steam. And I'm going to do another one of my play the game while we review it kind of things. And let me just go ahead and talk about how I feel, you know, the game not only in the Divinity trilogy, but also as a Gamebryo game. And just in case you weren't familiar, the Gamebryo engine is the same engine that is used mostly, or most people know of, for the Elder Scrolls games and the Fallout games. So, up until this game, is the only thing I had ever heard of it being in was those games and by Bethesda. So I kind of thought it was a Bethesda only engine, but apparently that is not the case. And so this game, for a Gamebryo engine game, is extremely stable, especially the Ego Draconis portion that you see me here playing in the background now. The entire time I played the Ego Draconis portion of the game, I didn't have a single crash at all the entire time. And in fact, I didn't really experience any major bugs or anything of that nature until I got to the Flames of Vengeance portion of the game. And to be fair, I think, I only had two times where I kind of fell through the world or got stuck on an environmental piece of the environment, excuse me. And that only happened to me twice total in Flames of Vengeance. Now, but to be fair, when I was doing that final attack as a dragon, it was extremely buggy, especially if you try to load a game halfway through the match, basically, or the match, halfway through the attack. And that just caused all sorts of sound issues and glitches. Well, like you probably saw if you watch my my ending videos, you saw basically two basically endings where the conversation with Igurna was basically cut off by the fact that I just had no sound. And, that was even me trying to put it on casual mode. So that was probably the biggest and most serious bug that I came across in the game. And I don't want to make light of it because it was definitely a very bad, you know, I guess you could call it a game-breaking bug. I mean, the game was still playing. It just had literally no sound whatsoever. So I don't know if you would call that a game-breaking bug or just a very inconvenient one. Oh, look, it's my good friend Willie. But anyway, so that's where my thoughts were on it as far as just the game engine. So from a Gamebryo engine perspective, it was amazingly stable and great from that point of view. In fact, not to throw shade at Bethesda games, but Gamebryo engine games are usually known for being infested with bugs and sometimes, heavy stability problems. Granted, this game isn't modded up the way majority of players mod up a Bethesda game, which does tend to cause them to have more stability issues. But, still, the end of the day, I do believe this game was much more, I guess, better programmed from a stability perspective. So there's that. Now, as far as a Divinity game, on the other hand, it actually had a lot of things going for it there as well. One of the things I would like to point out is I think the skill system was probably no, I wouldn't say probably. It was one of the best skill systems of any of the Divinity games that I've played so far, for sure. So one of the things that Divine Divinity, for instance, did is it would divide the types of skills you have by the type of weapon. So, like, for instance, right now, you see me playing as a ranger, which, by the way, is basically on the game on easy mode. So for a ranger, you would have bow skill and crossbow skill. And then other types of characters in the game, you would have axes, maces, swords, daggers. They would all be separate skills in Divine Divinity. One of the things they improved in Beyond Divinity was they consolidated everything into basically kind of like the skill tree that you see here, where you have unarmed. Actually, I don't remember unarmed being there or not, but you did have single-handed weapon, dual wielding, sword and shield, and two-handed weapon expertise. That was definitely in Beyond Divinity. The only difference was each of the skills in Beyond Divinity, you had a certain aspect of that skill you could raise at a time. So the skills were broadened in Beyond Divinity, but then they broke down each individual component, which kind of was not as good as what you saw in Divine Divinity. So this took the best aspects of Beyond Divinity, since a lot of these skills are very similar to what you saw in that game, and then took the aspects of Divine Divinity, kind of combined it together. So the skill system in this game, in my humble opinion, is by far the best skill system that I've seen in any of the games so far. Storyline, I think the story was actually really good. I can understand where some people initially got upset with how the story ended, because the story did end kind of on a pretty bad note, with Damien basically taking over and, you imprisoned. Well, I'm going to get killed here, aren't I? So it was definitely a bit of a sour ending from that perspective. But the game itself, up to the point, actually had a pretty decent story the whole time. One of the things I would probably criticize Flames of Vengeance for is how the game, the storyline of what was going on in Flames of Vengeance didn't really seem to jive with what, the external circumstances of what was going on. Is like they had you doing all these side quests, and I understand why, because they wanted you to get a feeling of accomplishment in the DLC, and that there's been plenty of stuff for you to do in there. So I can understand the reasoning behind it, but it seems like, when you're in the city of Alvaroth and you're basically being bombarded, as it were, it seems weird that you would be going off and doing all these weird side quests. Now, that wasn't really an aspect I felt was at play during Ego Draconis. Ego Draconis, you weren't rushed, as it were, in the main storyline, so it didn't feel like you were in any, like I said, a huge rush to get to anywhere, which Flames of Vengeance definitely had that feeling. It's like, okay, I need to hurry up and figure out what's going on, but at the same time, I want to get all my achievements in the game. And that's something I'd really like to point out, and I think probably just a great developer gift to the players, if you will, is the fact that they have an in-game achievement system built into it, which is really neat, because I believe when this game came out, because the developer's cut came out in 2012, the original game came out in 2009. So around that time, you were starting to see the whole Steam achievement system, the Xbox 360 achievement system, all that was kind of starting to come into play. And so I don't know if they added the achievement system after the fact, but, the game came out before they had an achievement system, or had the achievements going on Steam, I guess. And then maybe they added that afterwards. I honestly don't know, because I never played this game originally. But the fact of the matter is that even though you don't have Steam achievements or GOG achievements, you do have achievements in the game. And I think that's a really neat thing for players. And I think it's a very player-focused action on the part of the developers, which just can't be stated how nice of a boon that is to us all. So I definitely like that. If you go to the Wikipedia article, one of the things they basically say, one of the biggest criticisms of the game was how dated the graphics were at the time. And honestly, I don't see it. I think the game looks great. I really do. I think this game. I guess maybe there probably were some better looking games at the time, but to be fair, I think the game looks good. Now, granted, I am someone who does like playing older games, so I'm not one of these people that has to have the absolute best looking game possible, to be happy. But I think the game looks good. I mean, I have it on the extreme settings right now, and you can see it. In my opinion, looks very good. So, I don't know who was complaining about the look of the game, but I think it looks good. And yeah, I don't think that's anything to criticize the game for, at least not in my opinion. Now, the difficulty, especially early on in the game, it can be pretty brutal. But to be fair, that's kind of par for the course for the Divinity games. Early on, the difficulty is pretty steep. So, like I said, not entirely out of the realm of what all the other games were. But once you get going, and especially if you take your time and explore things and do every side quest, well, if you saw my playthrough, I was pretty dang powerful. Not to pat myself too hard on the back. So I think from a difficulty standpoint of the game, only early on is it truly difficult. I mean, there is definitely some challenge here, there, and I did have instances where I died, even later on in the game. But by the time I got around to Flames of Vengeance, I was so powerful that nothing could really touch me, except for that dragon fight. That dragon fight, that was difficult. Even on casual mode, that was probably the most difficult portion of the game. And from a story perspective, I think probably the biggest gripe I would have for the story overall is the fact that there's a huge plot thread just left dangling with the fact that we don't know what happens to Damien. Damien is this recurring, villain throughout the game. Time and time again, he basically lets you go and never does anything to you. But he's always there in the background, being a horrible person. But you never fight him. You never fight him directly. Even at the end of Flames of Vengeance, where they have it is a good ending, don't get me wrong, but even at the end of Flames of Vengeance, we still don't know what happened to Damien. And I guess one of the biggest problems I have with that is the fact that I don't know if this plot thread will ever be addressed, because Larian Studios, the people who put out this game, they kind of went back in time after they did this game. They went way back in the past for their strategy game. I think it's called Divinity Dragon Commander, if I'm not mistaken. And then Divinity Original Sin, I believe, happened before Divine Divinity. And then Original Sin 2 happened after Beyond Divinity, but before this game. So the 3 games that they did happened all before Divinity 2. And basically, right now they're working on Baldur's Gate 3, so they may never come back to this series. Or if they do come back to this series, well, who knows when they'll come back. And if they do, I mean, think about it. This game came out in 2012. And for them to put 3 other games out afterwards that have, nothing to do with resolving the plot of this game, we may never see a resolution to Damien and the Divine One. And that, to me, is kind of a bit of a shame, really, because I think that's something you would like to see resolved. Especially if you're a player and you've invested enough time where you played all 3 of the Divinity games, you'd want to see the end of Damien for sure. Especially after all the, well, not to sound cliche, but villainous things he did in this game. And it's just, Well, that's something you're not going to get to see, it looks like. Now, you stop being all flashy and just shoot him. But let me see. What else can I talk about the game? Yeah, skill system's great. I think the graphics are good. Music. I can't believe I almost forgot that. The music of the game. I did like the music for Divine Divinity. I like the music for Beyond Divinity. I think the music in Beyond Divinity had an issue where sometimes it would just play the music that just didn't seem to fit the atmosphere very well. I can't say anything like that about this game. I think the music choices in this game just got elevated. I mean, the music is just awesome. It fits the mood every single time. Uh, I just can't say enough good about the game, really, as far as it goes, in, as far as music. The composer, I think he passed away after composing the score to Divinity Original Sin, but to say the least, he was a good composer, and I think his work in the first two games was really good, but he really elevated the musical score in this game for sure. So yeah, that's basically a lot of my glowing praise. I think story wise, it's probably the best story. Yeah, I definitely say it's probably the best story of the three Divinity games I've played so far. Uh, Easily the best skill system of the Divinity games. I think the overall stability of the game is really good. The only thing I would say mostly is I think the biggest downsides are you're early on. The difficulty is very high. The very last dragon battle, the difficulty is extremely high, even on casual mode. And the thing is, you don't have to play on normal mode like I did. In fact, there is harder difficulty if you really want to give yourself a real challenge. You can up the difficulty of the game, which I probably could have done, given how insanely powerful I was at the time there in Flames of Vengeance. But I I would say that would be another thing I would criticize the game for, is the fact that all of my skills that I had as a dragon kind of got redistributed in Flames of Vengeance, and so I don't even know if my skills were actually set up where they were before. So I think I kind of got a downgrade in skills pretty badly, actually, from where I was prior to loading up Flames of Vengeance. And not only that, but they also changed the part where, like, all of my button layouts got completely and totally changed. So that kind of stunk a little bit, to say the least. But other than that, I mean, this game it's definitely up there. I would say it's easily my favorite game of the three Divinity games, and I think it has great replayability value. You can see right now I'm playing a ranger, and it's a completely different style of game than the melee focused character that I was playing. But the skill system in this game, like all the other Divinity games, it allows you to create a custom character to fit your liking. And I mean, probably no two characters would be the same. Basically, I mean, I'm sure people will find a specific build that works better for them and stick to it, and so people will probably be inclined to have very similar builds, if not exactly the same. But you can mix and match things to fit your own whims, however you feel, basically. And and if you look at it this way, there's also four real classes. You have a priest class, mage, warrior, and ranger that you see here, and they're all very different. I mean, priest is kind of weird, because you would think with the word priest, at least in my mind, that they would have healing magic. No, they do all summoning stuff. Maybe they should call that necromancer instead of priest. I think that's kind of odd wording on their part, but whatever. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of content in this game. A lot of replayability. And, you know, that's the thing is, I could see myself coming back to play this game for sure. It's great. In fact, replaying it would make me playing it on Linux be probably um, something I could actually look into doing, because now I've seen all the movies, and it's not like the movies would be a big surprise to me or anything like they were the first time, because I've never played this before. Um, and so that's why I would think overall I would give this a score of 4.5 out of 5 stars, or 90%. I'd put it on par with Divine Divinity a little bit. I don't want to give it, you know, a super glowing review per se, because I mean there were some pretty significant bugs in the Flames of Vengeance portion of the game, and those bugs definitely did hurt it. And also just the fact that they stuck so many side quests in that portion of the game didn't really fit with the theme of what was going on. So I do want to, I have to take off a little bit of points for those aspects of Flames of Vengeance, but at the same time, Flames of Vengeance did something that was sorely needed, which is basically wrap up the majority of the actual story of the game, and not in on such a downer of a ending. Basically, it does leave that dangling plot thread of Damien, unfortunately, and like I said, we probably will never see the ending to that. I mean, I would like to be proven wrong, but I mean, it's already been a decade since the developers cut of the game came out, and so chances of us actually seeing, you know, a resolution to that kind of grows slim as the days go on, to say the least. But I highly would recommend this game to anybody. If you've played it before, I think it may be worth looking into trying it out on Linux. But as far as a Linux gaming experience, if you've never played the game and you want to see all the in-game movies while you're playing, unfortunately, I can't really recommend it for Linux at this point in time. But um, like I said, as a replay candidate, I could definitely recommend it as a good Linux game, because you can see right now I'm running it on Linux, and things are performing very well. Um, I haven't had any sound issues, and also one of the things I would point out is this game is a perfect candidate for using Anti-Micro X to map your keyboard to a controller. And I would say if you're interested in playing this game, especially if you want to play it like on your big screen TV, definitely look into Anti-Micro X. It worked absolutely flawlessly for this game. I mean, I would play around with the button layouts and whatnot over and over again, but it worked. It worked amazing. And I would say that's not really a review of this game per se, but I think for, you know, any older game, definitely look into that, using that program to get better playability. I mean, if I didn't want to, I mean, I would actually be tempted to try out, say, something like Morrowind using that program, and I think it would work really well. But for now, I want to say that Divinity 2 comes highly recommended. It's a very polished game in just about every aspect that you can think of. They lose a little bit of their polish there in the DLC section of the game, but it is a very good game. Lots of content, you know, built-in achievement system, which is great. Just something that the developers added for players that I think is just a good thing for them to do, and it's a good time all around. So anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.